we need to highlight for understanding. The first, of course, being a bit of teaching. We want to take note first of where this takes place. It's between two cities or two regions. The outskirts of the city, the very fringes of the city. And the people in this area, they're outcasts. The people who exist on the very fringes of society. These people, lepers, who had been exiled, cast out because of their illness, approach Jesus, and they don't go too close. They're required to maintain a distance so that they don't spread the disease to others. And they cry out for mercy. Now Jesus responds as he usually does, in a bit of an unusual way. He tells them, go to the priest and be declared clean. But when he tells them this, they still have open sores on their bodies. They have not yet been healed. And in order to go to the priest, you have to be healed. So the priest can say, you're clean enough to return into society. But based on their faith, they turn and start in the direction of the priest. And somewhere between the time they have left Jesus and their arrival to the priests, their sores heal over. Completely gone. Once they realize they're healed, 9 begin to celebrate, dancing around and shouting and forgetting one basic thing. While the Samaritan, and that's an important note in this parable, in this story of the healing, for us to understand. The Samaritan turns around and goes back, praising God. Throws himself down at Jesus' feet to give thanks. It's an interesting story and an interesting fact that one of these people, the Samaritan, the Gentile in the group, receives the same healing as the Jews did, and the Gentile is the one to give thanks, while the Jews take for granted the healing that they received. See, the Jews were the chosen people. They feel privilege. They feel that that's something that they should have gotten. So they stand on privilege rather than giving thanks for the healing that God has provided. The story of giving thanks is a reminder for us not to take the things for granted that God gives us. From the very basic of things, our food daily, our house, our church, the people in our lives. But there's another message that dwells in this story as well. 10 men in an area, a region between two cities, on the outskirts, the fringes of society. You know, those people. Those people. And Jesus offers them healing. Not just the chosen ones either, but the Samaritans, the ones that the Jews fight against, the ones that the Jews argue with about their basic theological understanding of God and who God is and how to worship God. That's the one that returns to praise God and give thanks. 10 people. Those people. The dirty, the outcast, the homeless. When I read this and connected it to the fact that Jesus is ministering to outcasts, it made me think of a story I read a long time ago. And it's said to be a true story. I have no way of proving that. But it's about one of those people. It's called Breakfast at McDonald's. Some of you may have read this. The story goes this way. It's about a woman. She says, I am a mother of 3, and I have recently completed my college degree. The last class I had to take was sociology. The teacher was absolutely inspiring with qualities I wish every human being had been graced with. Her last project was a project called Smile. The class was asked to go out and to smile at 3 people and document their reaction. This woman confesses that she says, I'm a very friendly person and always smile at everyone and say hello anyway, so I thought this would be a piece of cake, literally. Soon after we were assigned the project, my husband, young son, and I went to McDonald's one crisp March morning. We were standing in line waiting to be served when all of a sudden everyone around us began to back away. And even my husband did as well. I didn't move an inch. An overwhelming feel of panic welled up inside me as I turned to see why they had all moved. And as I turned around, I smelled a horrible, dirty body smell. And there standing behind me were 2 poor homeless men. As I looked down at the short gentleman close to me, he was smiling. His beautiful sky blue eyes were full of God's light as he searched mine for acceptance. He said, good day, as he counted a few coins that he had been clutching. The second man fumbled with his hands as he stood behind his friend, and I realized that the second man was mentally challenged, and the blue-eyed gentleman was his salvation. I held my tears as I stood there with them. The young lady at the counter asked him what they wanted. He said, coffee is all, miss, because that's all he could afford. See, if you wanted to sit in a restaurant, you had to buy something, and all they really wanted was to warm up that day. Then I really felt it. The compulsion was so great, I almost reached out and embraced the little man with the blue eyes. That's when I noticed all the eyes in the restaurant upon me, watching and judging my every action. I smiled, and I asked the young lady behind the counter to give me 2 more breakfast meals on a separate tray. Walked around the corner to the table where the men had chosen a resting spot. I put the tray on the table and laid my hand on the blue-eyed gentleman's cold hand. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, thank you. I leaned over, began to pat his hand, and said, I didn't do this for you. God is here working through me to give you hope. I started to cry as I walked away to join my husband and son. When I sat down, my husband smiled and told me that is why God gave you to me, to give me hope. We held hands for a moment, and at that time, we knew that not only because of the grace that we had been given were we able to give, That day showed me the pure light of God's sweet love. I returned to college on that last evening of class with this story in hand. I turned in my project, and the instructor read it. Then she looked up at me and said, "Can I share this?" I slowly nodded and gave, and she got the attention of the class. She began to read, and that is when I knew that we as human beings and being part of God share this need to heal people and to be healed. In my own way, I had touched people at McDonald's that day. I had touched my husband, my son, my instructor, and every soul that shared the classroom on that last night I spent as a college student. I graduated with one of the biggest lessons I would ever learn: unconditional acceptance. Unconditional acceptance of one of those people. Hope through a simple gesture of buying someone a meal, of noticing and acknowledging these two men, understanding that they had a very basic need, a need for food and warmth. The men that we read about in the story, those 9 that went dancing about, they were simply following the law. The law of keeping their distance, the law of going to the priest to be healed. And Jesus commanded them to acknowledge that law. But one, the very one Jesus had targeted, the Samaritan, one of those people is the one who remembers to give thanks. Jesus ministers to everyone, regardless of who they are, what they are, where they're from, or how bad they might smell. Regardless of whether or not they're different. Remembering to give thanks for the blessings that we receive from God, there's a way for us to truly tell God we're thankful for the mercies that He gives us. And that's that we care for those outcasts. That we minister to those people. Those who are different. Jesus put no restrictions upon the lepers or the Samaritans, the Jews or the Gentiles. He had no limits on who He would heal. He healed without limit. He gave without limit. Jesus healed all who would come and ask. And His healing was far deeper than just the physical. Take note that to the Samaritan, He tells the Samaritan that you are healed by your faith. You see, the 9, they missed the spiritual healing. The one who gave thanks received salvation that day as well. Not only was he healed of his sores, but his spirit was healed, and he received salvation. Each time that we minister to the widow, the orphan, the weak, the sick, the poor, the good, the evil, the outsiders, the foreigners, anytime we are in ministry with the very people that we want to ignore, that is how we say thank you to Christ for the blessings that we are granted. We are not worthy of the blessings we receive. We are not privileged to even receive them. So we need to share what it is God gives to us. so that we might say, thank you, Jesus, for saving us, for healing us from our sin. Jesus sat with sinners, ate with sinners. Even this homeless man in his state of need and homelessness understood that. He was ministering to someone who had even less than he did. His challenged friend, his companion. Don't choose who you help. Choose to help all who need. Don't place restrictions on how you show God's love. God loves you recklessly, so love recklessly the same. There are no limits upon who you can help or how much you should help. Help and love without bounds. Don't just say thank you to Christ for what he has done for you. Show your thanks in how you live each and every day for one of those people. Smile. Look for their reaction. Tend to their needs. And give thanks